Rebecca, fire away.
Well, okay. Here we go. First of all, Jim, we should talk about how this is a little bit different than our typical webinars with whether it's myself or other guests. Um, in that it's not just so much me giving a presentation, but it's more of a dialogue between all three of us here online and, of course, you in the audience. And we're just expanding on the Garden Trends article that I wrote, and I wrote last year's also. And personally speaking, I take this seriously, and I never want the trends article. I see so many trends articles out there from different companies and whatever, and they seem to be just based around promoting whatever they're selling. And I really wanted to give a lot of thought as to what I see because I watch a lot of gardening shows, read a lot of gardening magazines, gardening books. And so I wanted to kind of really think about what I see changing or what might be brought over from last year. So I'm excited to be elaborating on some of these trends, especially with everybody here involved and Denise, of course. So let's get started, right? And Jim, you'll chime in, and Denise, you chime in whenever you want. Um, Feel free. So the first trend that I had written about was the rise of native plants and nativars, um, which is a new, somewhat new term. And I think some people may not know. I know from my own experience when I meet with a lot of gardeners, they're not really sure what cultivars are and what nativars. So I thought I would just put up this slide talking about the definition of what a nativar is. And whenever I do my presentations, I normally don't read off of this slide. I don't like to put a lot of words, but sometimes in this presentation I have because I think it's important. And so this is the definition of a nativar. And they can either be found naturally growing like a sport. It can be naturally growing in the wild, but usually it involves man-made tweaking of a native plant, which has different traits about them. And it could be brighter flowers, or it could be more colorful, more compact size, etc. And so what I wanted to just show a couple, there's so many examples out there, but cone flowers is a really common um, category of plants where the native, this is just one of the natives on the left there, the pale pink, the Echinacea pallida, and then all the beautiful colors you also see in the nurseries, like this bright orange, frankly scarlet. There's a million of them. There's even the double flowered varieties. There's so many involved that are nativars. And this is just a photo I took this summer of actually in Lake Tahoe. This gardener had planted a million coneflowers. And it looks to me like a lot of those are the nativars where they've been tweaked for the brighter colors. Another category is the milkweed, right? Our native Asclepias versus some like this tropical one, the brightly colored tropical one, which is so easily found in nurseries. This is a very interesting one, and where I did put in more links in the notes because there is a lot of research that has been done on the tropical. Is it better or worse than the native? And it's coming out pretty solid that it's not good for monarchs for a whole host of reasons. And those links in there support that. But not all cultivars are bad. They're not. And this is the other slide that has a fair amount of text on it. But I think it's important because it shows the pros and the cons. Like for me as a designer, I respond to what my clients are looking for and when they want advice and they want a certain look. And so I could talk about natives all day long. They might really not want a lot of natives for a variety of reasons. They've had bad luck with them or whatever. So if you look on the pros at the bottom, it's bridging the gap. For me, that's a great way to sneak some in. that look and do really well in the garden to try and teach people like, hey, listen, you can have natives that do really well and that aren't high maintenance and that you'll love in your garden. So it can kind of help to start to convert some people over into researching natives.
Rebecca,
Yeah.
Denise chimed in, are nativars a way to generate new income from old standbys? Is that part of it, or what do you think?
Are you asking me or Rebecca?
Rebecca, or either one.
What was your question? Generate income?
Is our nativars a way to generate new income from old standbys? They're aren't they actually to try to solve a purpose in the garden, right?
Yeah, I don't, I mean, at the end of the day, breeders, are trying to sell their plants, but um, I think they're doing it to make it more appealing to people. Because, for example, a lot of natives sometimes get pretty rangy and pretty large. So if they're making them more compact, they'll fit into smaller residential gardens a lot easier. So they're doing it a lot of times to solve some problems, which are keeping people away from natives, is what I see. Um,
Denise, you were commenting the other day about you're a fan, right?
Well, I'm a fan of, actually, I'm not a fan of the term native R. No offense, Rebecca. I
oh,
just,
I didn't make it up, so you're not hurting my
yeah,
feelings.
no, but I think it's a great, bridging the gap is a great piece because a lot of people they typically wouldn't buy anything that said native on it.
Mhm.
But there's some, especially in California, there's some just stunning, beautiful, beautiful varieties that have been selected from the wild that there's a lot of hikers that maybe will see, oh, that's a beautiful, it's much bigger, it's much, and then the plant is more compact. And there's all these reasons why a native gardener hiker would maybe collect some seed or collect some cuttings, not very many, but a few, and bring them back and propagate them. And that's how, for California natives, I think that's most of what we have here. I think in other states, they're more bred for a specific trait, like smaller size is a huge thing. And they also come with maybe attractive new names that people can relate to better. So I think it is a bridge, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And it's been brought up in the questions. There was a note about Mount Cuba.
Mhm.
Not all nativars are going to have the same benefit as a native in every case, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And well, I'll go on to the next slide here. I had taken this slide. I hope they're okay. It's from the Ecological Landscaping Alliance, ecolandscaping.org. And what it does, just looking at this, you can see the native plant on yellow in the left, and then the cultivars on the right. And that's kind of saying, yeah, you can see how some of them are more compact, some of them are more colorful, different sizes, etc. But what the next two slides I'll show are that they're not all the same. And it's really interesting. So much more research needs to be done on this, which will take many, many years. So the Mount Cuba research is doing one. This Ecological Landscaping Alliance is another. Doug Tallamy is conducting research a lot. And so there's different things to look at. It's super interesting. So this slide here, for example, what it's showing is the different pollinators and how often they visit the straight species versus some of the cultivars. And it looks pretty similar, right? Like if you look at that first set there, which we'll just look at here, under the red columbine, you can see that with the red columbine and its cultivars, the small bees and flies that visit are fairly similar. So there's not a huge amount of variation happening on this particular graph. But if you go and you look at this particular graph that they've put up, you can see that on the native species, what they're calling the wild type, it's like so many more pollinators are visiting it versus the other cultivars. So there's like which pollinators are interested in these plants, how often they're visiting. And this particular group here what they did is they took, they've used regular gardeners like ourselves. They call them the citizen scientists. And they've asked them to plant certain plants and to write daily notes from 3 different areas around the country, Chicago, Denver, and San Diego, and do the comparisons that way. And so these are their initial findings, and it's a few years old by now, but you can see, like on that very last section there, the New England aster, how so many more pollinators visit it versus the purple dome. Like, it's a huge difference. So in a nutshell, a ton more research needs to be done in this aspect, whether or not, they're still good for pollinators, how much better is the straight species than the others, et cetera.
Rebecca, Helen has chimed in here. I'm a botanist by education. These are
Yeah.
my thoughts on nativars. If the cultivated change does not negatively impact the pollen and nectar production, it is fine. A more compact plant, as an example. Sometimes leaf color will impact the leaf eater insects in a negative way. Red leaves, for example.
Yes, yes.
So it really can be down to the plant level.
Yes. And I read that when I was kind of reading these studies. She's absolutely right about the leaf color. So I personally love using maroon and burgundy leafed plants in my designs. So if I choose a nativar that's got a red leaf, I'm not doing a great thing there. Like that study just proved, like a lot of the pollinators don't like that. So those are great points.
To the audience out there, could you put in the Q&A is rate yourself on a 1 to 5 on your understanding of nativars and the positives and negatives. That'd be really helpful. And we'll sort of see where everybody's out on
Yeah.
that. And then Rebecca, you've got a lot of great resources on that, but this is not a slam dunk topic.
Yeah. Mm-mm, mm-mm. But I guess at the end of the day, like Denise and I both kind of said, if it bridges the gap and it gets more people that are to kind of turn a blind eye towards natives, gets them looking at them, that's a positive. So if we can just kind of make sure we go down the right road as we continue this in the next few years and make good decisions with the cultivars being bred and released to
Yeah.
the public.
I would add one more thing. I think it depends on what your goals are. I think like if I was designing a habitat restoration project, I would not use any of the name varieties at all. It would all be wild plants, which can actually be really hard to find except through specialist nurseries. So depends on where you're at and what your goals are.
I agree.
All right. Well, we better move on, huh?
Yes, yes. But yeah, that was a biggie. The second trend, redefining perfection, finding harmony in a less tidy garden. We've talked about that. I really see all media associated with gardening going down this road. There's that huge leave the leaves movement, letting them fall into the garden and stay there and decompose naturally as much as you can. It's just good for the soil, it's good for the microbes, it's good for everything. Leaving the seed heads as late as you can throughout the year before tidying up in the spring, the leaves. So much research about insect and why to do that for the insects. Like, this is just a little the sweetest little thing. It's got an awful name, the sweat bee, but they burrow under mulch and under leaves is where they live in the winter. So if you strip everything away, you're really affecting the pollinators. But this trend also is embraces just kind of taking a more relaxed approach to your garden. And if you have a tree that's half dead or all dead, if you can leave it standing for a whole host of reasons, you're doing a good thing. And so that's called like a tree snag. And this is one that I have in my garden, and it's a very old elderberry, native elderberry that's so big it's grown up into like a tree, and it's almost completely dead. But instead of removing it and planting something else, I cannot tell you how many birds absolutely love this tree? Because there's all these cracks and holes in the tree trunk, and it will fall down and blow down in a storm eventually. But this is looking at it through a different angle, and you can see that hole there. I have so many birds that make nests every single spring, and it's so fun to watch. And so if you can leave these to just naturally decompose as long as you can, and take that time to watch, because you'll be surprised at how much wildlife these tree snags support. I know it's not easy to do if you've got a small garden. The last thing you want to see is like a big dead tree right there. But if you can, leave them. This was a wonderful, wonderful gardener, Lonnie Freymiller in Southern California. And she had to cut down many, 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 many years ago when they first bought this property. They had all these trees that needed to be removed. Some of them needed to be removed. So she created this fence, this wall. Really, it's a wall. And out of the tree logs. And there's so many little critters that make their nests in that wall. It's a really beautiful thing she did. Um, I recently came upon this on Instagram and I took a screenshot of it because it's just beautiful. And besides, it kind of shows you, if you're interested in finding out more about this, it's called a bug snug, which is such a cute name. Love this idea. It's making a teepee for bugs to overwinter in, or small critters. This is Omved Gardens, and they've got a great Instagram page. The link is in the notes that I sent you. Super easy to do. And you're providing a habitat for pollinators, especially in the winter. And of course, there's so many different types of insect hotels. This one I really like. It's from the UK's National Trust website. And it's a great way to use like bricks and twigs and things that you might have lying around. So there's just such a great movement, and I love it, about encouraging wildlife and pollinators to your garden in a whole
To
host
the
of different
audience,
ways.
I'm sorry, Rebecca.
That's okay. Go on. I'm done.
To the audience, would you put in the Q&A, do you lean more toward tidy or leave the leaves and the spent blooms? Where do you fall on the spectrum in that regard?
Yeah, and personally, like I write about all the time. If anybody reads my blog out there, the wonderful allspice, the what is it, Calicanthus Aphrodite variety. I love that. It has really big leaves, huge leaves. So, and that's sort of placed, even though it's a biggie, it's kind of right up front in the middle of my yard, really visible. I don't necessarily want to see all those huge leaves sitting there in this massive pile. So what I've done is I've just gathered those up. It takes a second. Just gather those up and put them behind some other shrubs and around the bottom of them to where they can naturally decompose. And I don't have to see those big ones. The small Japanese maple leaves, I have a ton of those and they're really tiny. Those are great. They can stay there all year round. It doesn't bother me at all. So I think it also kind of depends on the leaves that you're leaving, where they are, how big they are, um, which I have heard from a lot of people. If they land on your lawn, you don't want them to gather on your lawn. That'll kill your lawn. Um, if they get too thick and they're really big and they take a long time to break down, they can get slimy. I used to have that problem. And they kind of almost, yeah, almost kind of prevent some water going through. So once they get too thick, I kind of spread them out a little bit to thin it out. So if you have areas like that, um, instead of raking them all, spread it out. Just yesterday, I was out, we're having some rain right now. And so I wanted to kind of take that time to move some of my big clumps of leaves around. And it's like, I noticed I just moved some away, and just moving up the top layer away a little bit, all these little bugs were in there. And I thought, oh, I don't want to disturb them. So I put the leaves back because I felt bad, going through the winter. I don't want to wreck their home. So that's where I
Rebecca,
lean.
by far, the comments are in the camp of leaving the leaves and messy versus tidy, waiting till spring to clean up. It seems like there's that's pretty standard procedure with the group.
Yeah, and I that doesn't surprise me with our audience here, but I do, like, I have a pretty vast customer base, and a lot of my longtime clients, they don't they don't want to have a messy looking garden. And I think outside of our group here, a lot of people don't like that look. And so it's really going to be a shift that we're
Several
seeing.
have mentioned that they've changed their opinion on that.
Yeah.
So that's coming along.
Yeah, and that's the definition of a trend, right? The more it's out there in the magazines and we talk about it, that shift is happening, which I love. I think it's great. Okay, so we can move on to the next if you like, which is the new look of low water landscapes. And this is something out here on the West Coast we've been dealing with for a long time because we're always in some sort of a perpetual drought. It's just the nature of the beast living out here. And this is a beautiful photo of Susan Morrison, who's a wonderful landscape designer out in my area. She and I both wrote our first book together, Garden Up. And she does a lot of this is her own personal garden, very low water. And I chose this photo because I hear this a lot from people and they always kind of phrase it like this to me, new client. They'll say, I don't want to use a lot of water, but I don't know. I don't really want it to look, and then they kind of pause. And I said, it's like a hot and dry desert. And they're like, yes, and I'm like, a low water garden does not have to look like a hot and dry desert. And it's all about plant selection, kind of design techniques, the way in which you water. And so I thought this photo did a great job showing this does not look like a hot and dry desert. This
You
is
mentioned the other day, Rebecca, that
yeah,
gray gives the hot
yeah,
look, right?
right. And I'll kind of show that in a couple slides. One of the things is, and we can go back to Susan's garden here, you can see there's a mix of colors. Design wise, like if you're designing a garden that's a low water garden, a lot of low water plants tend to have gray foliage. Well, if you use too much gray, it can very easily look hot and dry, start to look that way. And it's important to mix in dark greens and burgundies and different colors to kind of add that lush look, which is what I've done here. This is my garden. And this particular section, you can see here, it doesn't look like a desert at all. And I've got lots of green and I've got some burgundy and dark red mixed in along with the gray plants. And it's the same here. That's a tall native ceanothus with the blue flowers. That's a green lamandra evergreen grass, which is really low water. I cannot believe how low water that grass actually is. So it really it depends on the plants that you choose. This is an example of inserting the dark burgundy colors. This is a Euphorbia blackbird is the variety. There's other dark maroon varieties, and they do really well in warmer climates like mine. And that burgundy plays off with the dark lush. It'll sort of act like shadows and kind of gives that depth. In this example here, we had removed a big lawn, and that gray part is Diamondia, which is a flat ground cover. It's a warmer climate ground cover. And why I chose this photo is because really wanted to make sure it wasn't really blinding and gray, which it can look very blinding in the hot sun. So we put in burgundy and dark green and flowers in the purple color around it to really give that lush look. Again, here's another example of another euphorbia adding to that look. So that's what I have to say on the topic is don't limit yourself to just gray, which is the notoriously drought tolerant plants. And when you go and look at the nurseries, a lot of times, gosh, at least where I live here, they don't do a very good job, I must say. The drought low water section and the drought tolerant section, it's pretty disappointing. There's like one section and it's like a lot of really gray leaf plants. And it's like, okay, all these other plants over in this other section are pretty low water. They should be in this section as well. And you would be encouraging a lot more people to choose from the low water tables that you've got set up.
Good point. Rebecca, I got asked a
yeah.
couple times that I should have had everybody put in there where they're listening from. That would be useful to the audience members. If you don't mind, put in the Q&A where you're dialing in from today. That'd be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm West Coast. We're all three of us here are West Coast. Jim's Southern California, and Denise and I are Northern California. So if we move on to fire, you want to move on? Are you ready to move on?
Go for
Okay.
it.
Fire resistant gardening. And boy, is this timely for Jim in your area. You've got some big fires down there.
Malibu is really going.
Mm-hmm. And it's raining where Denise and I live. Yet fire is always at the top of our mind out here. And I mean, look at what New Jersey just went through. It's all over the place. And so, you know, it used to be just not too far in the past that fire resistant gardening is pretty much a West Coast topic, you know, fire prone areas. But now it's just happening everywhere, as heartbreaking as that is. And so it's interesting. I put in a lot of links on this one too, because there's so much to creating like a fire-wise garden, firescaping, it can be called. So much to it, again, with the plant selection, but also how you plant. And there's so many resources out there for you to kind of do your own research. But the basic idea is that around your home, there's gardening zones. And like the first zone is usually the lowest growing plants within maybe 30 feet of your home. The second zone moves out a little farther, maybe 70 feet. It's the mid zone, and that's usually where people have their more traditional type of garden. And you can have little taller plants, and if you have trees and taller shrubs, you can prune the lower limbs off of those a little bit. This photo here is showing it, just an example of some low water plant in that first zone, the ground covers. But then the third zone, even farther out, that's really should be no closer than about 100 feet from the home. That's where you're really focusing on pruning and keeping those trees cleared of dead branches. You're keeping your shrubs from accumulating a lot of leaf litter that can catch fire easily, etc. The goal really is to keep the fire from they call it laddering up from the ground. So when an ember blows over, you don't want it to land where there's a lot of dry, hot summer leaves that are all piled up in the center of a shrub, for example, or dead tree branches that are growing towards your house. This is by no means an exhaustive, you know, few minutes that we're talking about here. It's just to point out that it's something that I think most people are really starting to think about with their garden and the zones of the garden. And then again, what makes a plant in particular fire resistant. And so while no plants are fireproof, just like no plants are deer proof, there's fire resistant plants, and they have low volatile oils. They might have really deep root systems that help anchor them, and they have a better chance of coming back, etc. So you can kind of read this list. What's really, really interesting that I wanted to point out is Deborah Lee Baldwin, who is kind of known as the unofficial queen of succulents, has written extensively about succulents and their incredible fire resistant qualities. And she has so much online, so please watch her videos. I tried to include a couple links there. She has so many videos about the amazing garden actually that survived going through a fire, and all the homes around it burned. And you can see where the fire stopped, and it burned half the succulents, and then they lived. They were burned, but they stopped the fire. They acted as a fire break. And I remember years ago when this happened, and the news jumped on that garden because it was like, oh my gosh, this is unbelievable that these succulents did this. And so there's a lot of information out there. And it's, as I recall, it is actually a client that Deborah had worked with or creating this. So there's a lot of information about that out there on the succulents to research, and videos that are great.
Denise, in your area, you guys had a horrific fire a while back. What was there any ideas that came out of that on what to do?
Yeah, lots of different ideas, and the different, you know, like the municipalities are involved. There's kind of conflicting information, not information, but ideas. Like we really want to conserve soil moisture and contribute organic matter to the soil. But that mulch that we want to add on is pretty flammable, especially if it gets really dry. And most people use drip, and unless the plant is really well watered, that can just itself, it could be, it could make it more flammable by not just being watered. And what's happening now in our area is they're encouraging gravel more instead of mulch. And then also what Rebecca was talking about, the different zones, so to reduce that laddering effect. And also the spacing of plants. Don't like a plant that gets 4 feet across. Normally they would typically in a landscape plan, they would be planted 4 feet on center. Now they're saying plant them 8 feet apart. So you get this different sort of look to the landscape, which I think is interesting and a good thing. And then even the leave the leaves is great, but maybe they're flammable. So we have these conflicts in the garden sometimes that might be hard to resolve. And I was talking to a friend of mine the other day that does podcasts in Sacramento, and she said one of their mantras is all gardening is local. So you just have to figure out what is the best thing for you to do. And it's always going to be different for different people in a different location, and you just make the best choice, and it's okay.
What you talked
Yeah.
about the other day was a hydrated landscape. That's in conflict with low water, right? So
Correct. Yeah.
And it's so important. And one of the articles that I had linked to in there, which I thought was so well done, and which it's the photo that I had just shown, but I think it was
Yeah,
like
that was a great article.
isn't that great? Yeah.
Yes.
And it was written, I think like by Native Plant Association, produced that article, as I recall.
Yeah, and
But
I think it was a landscape architect's house. Wasn't it?
It's
I think so.
beautiful.
It was
And
beautiful.
she said over and over and over, exactly what you said, Denise, is like, listen, I know we have to be low water out here, but they have to be hydrated. You can't have these tortured if you're gonna have a garden, don't go so low water that your plants are half dead. They don't look good and they're very flammable. So hydration is key. Don't do overhead sprinklers out here. We don't do that so much. We do drip. So that's great. Really make sure those plants are hydrated. That will help you in a fire. But like you said, it's counterintuitive to everything we've been talking about. Leave the leaves, put down mulch. Okay, watch your house burn. It's going to catch on fire. It's like we can't win. It's really difficult out here. But like you said, gardening is local. You got to, out here on the West Coast, we're very fire prone. If other people listening are in very fire prone, you may not be able to have your garden be so lush and having all your plants touch. Have them more spaced out. Maybe start introducing gravel, like you said, as a mulch instead of the bark. There are some things that you can do to sort of modify your existing garden. Yeah, there's some conflicting pushing and pulling, isn't there?
Yeah.
I
We do the
agree.
best we can, and
I know.
it may not be right 100% of the time, and not everybody will agree with you, but
Yeah.
it's a great big wide world, and there's room for lots of different opinions and ways to do things.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Okay, the next trend, creating more living spaces for people and wildlife. I'm glad to see that this is just each year getting bigger and bigger, which I love. In this particular photo, this was in this area of the garden, the driveway strips, they can be called. There's an actual term for that called a hell strip, which is an actual term because it's so difficult to create a garden in these areas for a whole variety of reasons. They're hard to irrigate. Usually there's not irrigation under the sidewalk, so people don't know how to irrigate this area. They can get trampled by people on the sidewalk. Dogs go to the bathroom on them a lot. They get really hot reflective heat from the asphalt in the street and the sidewalk. The soil is often super compacted, especially in newer developments where a lot of the tractors have been building these areas are just some of the reasons. So this is just one area. I just wanted to show another hell strip. This is by a designer in Southern California, Yvette Soler, and does beautiful work. And this isn't her own garden. This is her own hell strip. And she made it edible gardens there. And this was several years ago. And she said her edibles and her vegetables and herbs would get stolen all the time. But she didn't care because she figured she was helping somebody who wanted it. And it was beautiful, and it's better than putting lawn. Here's an example. This is in a really hot area in kind of the central part of California that's very, very hot, in a newer development. And up in the small photo, those are areas where people traditionally put lawn because they don't know what else to put. So they put lawn. And this person instead decided to put native grasses, which is wonderful. I love it. I think it looks beautiful too. But it's not just hell strips. New areas for wildlife are a lot of the rooftop gardens. This is a photo from Hamilton College. They had converted one of their flat roofs to this really beautiful rooftop garden. There's lots of examples of that. You can think about the High Line, for example, right, in New York. I just read this great article in the New York Times a couple weeks ago about cemeteries, a big movement about rewilding cemeteries. And these photos here are from Sacramento's historic cemetery. And I took these photos a few years ago. And I just love this because the Sacramento chapter of the Native Plant Society has really done an amazing job in rewilding this old historic cemetery with California natives, which are so neat. And a lot of colleges are rewilding a lot of their huge expansive lawn areas. And this is just one section of Loyola Marymount College. And this is a beautiful example of the Grinnell College in Iowa. They have a massive rewilding project and a great website too, where you can look at it, where they're using a lot of the natives in their campus. So there's a lot of areas, and I just see it happening. I wish it happened faster, but it's happening at least, where previously unused lawns and areas like that are being thoughtfully designed. Which is fantastic. Do you all have anything to add to that, Jim or Denise or anyone in the audience?
No, for the audience if your neighborhood has a so-called hell strip, do you have it planted in a particular way, or is it grass? What do you have there, if that applies to you?
Yeah, and I've done a lot of hell strips actually over the years, and a lot of times people just get so frustrated they just put those cobblestones, the like river rocks, which are not good because the poor people who park in the street and need to walk over to the sidewalk, I always call them ankle twisters because you can't really walk on them very easily. But it's frustrating. I mean, it's, how are you going to water it? And here's the other thing is a lot of times the city owns that property. And so they may not want you to plant something there. And I think ultimately, if they wanted it ripped out, they could. So you have to be thoughtful in what you put there. You don't want anything too tall that blocks your vision when you're backing out of the driveway. You don't want anything with thorns on it that's going to stab the ankles of people walking by, etc. But okay, that's my thoughts on that. Number 6, turning to resilient plants to manage environmental stressors. A lot of us are having to do that. I mentioned at the beginning of our presentation that that's what my focus is this coming 2025, is to really start to use more resilient plants, and plants that I thought were resilient and they aren't, because our weather is just getting hotter and hotter. So one of the common ones that we've really all had to embrace is the boxwood substitutions, because of the boxwood blight. And so I put this photo in, did this garden a couple of years ago, and it's where we did not use boxwood, but we used euonymus, boxleaf euonymus, which has little tiny leaves. It's small, so it stays pretty compact. If you want it really clipped tightly, you might clip it once a year. So that's a perfect example of a resilient plant. Instead of planting boxwood, that could easily get wiped out if boxwood blight settles in. plant something that's resilient to that. A couple of the other plants that were mentioned in the article are the inkberry holly. This particular one is called strongbox. And again, and there's one called gembox, and 2.5 by 2.5. Little tiny leaves, evergreen. So it's a perfect substitution. You could easily clip it if you like that clipped look. This is one that was mentioned, and I haven't tried this, and I'm not even sure I'm pronouncing it right. Jukebox pyrocomeles, and it is a fairly new introduction. But it was interesting that this one, as I was reading about it, it earned the blue ribbon at the UC Davis test trials, and that's a college that's out near us, and it's super, super hot environment. And anything that they trial and that they give an award to makes, or it can make their all-star list of plants. Those are plants that can just take tons of abuse. It's super low water and they look good. So this won a ribbon there. So I'm going to have to try and find this one. It's by Proven Winners, and test that in the garden. So I think I had put a link to that. The UC Davis All-Star list is a really good reference for really tough plants. Out in warmer climates, a dwarf myrtle. I love it, our dwarf myrtles here. That's another substitute for a low-growing hedge, very low water, really beautiful and tough. Ginkgo trees, if you're talking about something taller like a tree, ginkgo trees, they've been around since the dinosaurs. They're a very resilient by nature tree. Super tough, drought, heat, cold, really bad soils. That's a great tree. This is a really dwarf variety, so cute, that we just saw a few weeks ago when we did our Sabrina Freeland and Sabrina's experience in their garden in Napa. And you can see here it's turning its beautiful colors. So there's dwarf ones. You don't have to have a big tree. A lot of perennials. There's a ton of plants out there. Yarrow is a really resilient plant. We put some links out there. Oh, I did want to mention this. I just got the latest issue of Fine Gardening magazine a couple days ago. And they're on the cover, they have an article, Adaptable Native Perennials for Sun and Shade. So adaptable plants. That's kind of where we're all heading right now with the climate that we've got. We can move on unless you want to. Jim, it looks like you're muted accidentally there.
Almost every area has had a change in zones, so this is particularly useful.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'd love to know. I mean, I would personally love to know what resilient plants everybody out there has found, because sometimes it's not even, it's like the latest and greatest introduction. Sometimes old standby, like the yarrow I just showed, that's moon shadow yarrow. It's been around for a long time, very resilient ginkgo trees, right? But I would love to know if anybody has some either new plants or old plants that have surprised them by being super resilient. I'm kind of collecting a bunch of plants on that, so please share your thoughts.
I have another thought about resilient plants and pollinator plants and natives. Like I've had mostly natives in my garden for a long time, but now with the climate changing, the seasons are shrinking when blooms are out, and so the time when pollinators can survive and birds can survive is also shrinking. So I'm expanding my palette to extend the season on either end for those insects and birds, and but try to keep it maybe in the same plant family, like salvias, penstemons, verbenas, things like that, that if it's in the same family, the insects tend to be able to recognize it. Not 100% of the time, but it's leaning in that favor, because we need something other than strictly native, at least in our area. Otherwise, we're going to end up with nothing. So I'm trying to end it on either end.
Are you saying, for example, if you were going to plant salvias, right? And let's say even native salvias, let's say like a native salvia that blooms in the spring and summer, but to find another salvia that blooms in the fall and winter to extend, even though it's not a native.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's actually such a good point. I love that. And I wrote an article on my blog, and it's not in the link, but I called it Four Season Salvias because there are some, at least in our climate here, that bloom all the way through December, even
Oh, they're
January
incredible.
and
They're
February,
incredible.
which is shocking. And now those wouldn't bloom, where it's super snowy and cold. But like the pineapple salvia, for example, pineapple sage, mine's in full bloom right now, and it's December. So that's a really good point to extend the season, even if you have to use a nativar, a term you hate, Denise. But that's a good point. I'm really glad you brought that up. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. The next trend, focus on mental well-being in the garden. I think we've all can appreciate this one. With all the craziness in the world right now happening, we all need to focus on how it can help us be a more positive person and to just sometimes even just get through the day. And it can be as something as simple as just setting out some chairs in the garden. I took this photo years ago at an Airbnb I had stayed in, and I just loved it. This is the most relaxing and casual. Even looking at this photo makes me feel more relaxed and casual. But it's not only embracing something that I think all of us here today know how it reduces stress and reduces anxiety and it improves your mood. But there's so many more aspects to this, like you can have potential faster recovery. That's actually being proven by studies. If you've got illnesses, for example, and I wanted to mention this book here. This has been out since 2000, I think 14, The Cancer Survivor's Garden Companion. And I love this book. And that's actually a photo of me in the corner. I'm in the book. The worst photos that I've ever taken in my life are in this book. And it's because I went through cancer. And so my friend wrote this book and she needed some, real photos of cancer patients. But it talks about, this book is excellent. And it just talks about the healing powers and if you're sick and not feeling good and how you can still get out in the garden and let it help nourish you. But besides the healing aspect of gardening, different groups of people experience unique advantages of the garden. Elderly people, they show that they have improved health ratings and social engagement when they're out in the garden, even working at a community garden. Dementia patients experience kind of reduced agitation and increased awareness. The list goes on and on. And I also put in the notes, I don't know if many of you have seen this documentary on Netflix. It's amazing, called Blue Zones. It's such a good documentary. And basically they're highlighting different zones throughout the whole world where people live to be really old, 100 years and up, and what commonalities each of these very random parts of the world have that can contribute to this. One of those commonalities is gardening, which is so interesting. No matter where it is in the world, those who garden live longer. Princeton did a study on this based in Minneapolis that I think I had linked to. There's so many studies out there that link to gardening helping, whether you're older, whether you're sick, whether you have dementia, helps you live longer, helps you heal faster.
Rebecca, you were listening to a radio program. I'd like to interject your thoughts you shared earlier on that about gratitude.
Yeah.
And this ties into you were mentioning the thinking of the gratitude actually changing the cell makeup of our minds. And the garden, what a great place to practice gratitude, right?
Right, right. I just listened to this today. This morning, I was going to the grocery store, and it was an interview, and Denise thinks that it might be the same person who actually did a TED talk on this. And she was with she's a professor with Gonzaga College in Washington. Her name is Dr. Monica Bartlett, and she teaches the positive emotion and social behavior lab there. So you can look that up. It was an amazing thing I listened to. And I love, of course, it's wonderful being, filled with gratitude. And it's not something that I naturally lean towards talking to people about. It's like, yeah, okay, I know. I feel gracious about everything. What's really interesting about this is the study's proven that if every single day you think of 3 things, and they can be really tiny things, that you're gracious for and the person who did it. So not just so much being great, oh, I'm so grateful for this beautiful garden that I have, but I'm really grateful for my neighbor next door who gave me these seeds many years ago. Or I'm grateful for that person who let me cut in line while driving, they let me in. By doing just 3 things a day and writing them down, you literally change the way your brain thinks. You're rewiring your brain. And then you start looking for the positive in your day-to-day experiences instead of looking for the negative, which is what we tend to see more often than the positive. And yeah, I think it's perfect for this, and I'm glad you all let me talk about it for a minute, because anything that I can do to rewire my brain to be happier and more positive is great. So that's my New Year's resolution, actually, is to start one of these journals.
Fantastic. To the audience, could you put in the Q&A if you have a place in your garden where you can contemplate or relax or think, or a special place in your own garden where that is and what it is, or if you want one, that'd be wonderful. And by the way, we have hundreds of comments, and we'll be aggregating these and adding a lot of them to the show notes. So you can have a list of these that we're seeing here if you're not.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, the 8th trend is a nod to nostalgia, which I love. And I've seen this for sure in my own design business. A lot of requests for like my clients for kind of nostalgic touches, and brings a sense of comfort and familiarity. And what I'm seeing is, like, people will say, oh, I'd like to put a peony. It reminds me of my grandmother. A lot of times the cottage style gardens fit into this category of nostalgic plants. But there's, the psychological benefits of nostalgia. There's that positive emotional impact that you feel with the peonies here. Old-fashioned cottage pinks here, the dianthus. Nostalgia kind of provides that mental escape from the present day-to-day stressors that we all face. Roses are a classic. This nostalgic touches, they sort of act as a happy place, right? They offer that sense of comfort and a sense of safety. But besides just the cottage plants or your own personal favorite plants, these nostalgic touches are also a coping mechanism for kind of the tough times that we go through. COVID-19 is a classic example. And these nostalgic touches help people with negative emotions, loneliness or anxiety. And I'm showing this photo, and I love this photo. Again, this is in Freeland and Sabrina's garden that we just saw up in Napa. And it's a crevice garden, and it's really neat. It's a crevice garden, which is also a trend, but I didn't put it in this list here. But if you look up, and I've circled it there, this is really neat. It's a train. And what this crevice garden is, it's a memory garden honoring Sabrina's father, who had recently passed away. And so this is a coping mechanism where you can honor somebody, you can remember somebody who's passed, and it's a beautiful thing. I love this. I've seen several clients have these memory gardens, and they're always so special. I'm just including this photo. This is from my past, and this is the very first garden that I have in my memory, and it was of my great-grandfather. And what this does is another aspect of nostalgia, is it creates this identity and continuity. And what I remember is that incredible fragrance of the lemon blooms, lemon blossoms, which are, to this day, my favorite smell in the world. And I incorporate it in every garden I've ever planted of mine. And I love those little bricks set on the diagonal in the background there. That's a really old-fashioned thing to do. And I love it. And I have that in my own garden because it just connects me with my past. Oh, I put this photo in here because when you kind of focused on nostalgia in your gardening, it's also a way to strengthen bonds of intergenerational sharing. And this example here, this is my family home in Lake Tahoe, and this is my mother and my daughter. And the three of us spent last summer redoing this whole section of the garden. A giant tree had died, huge pine tree died. And it was so fun for the three of us to garden, and really was great for my mother and my daughter to experience that together. That's a really special thing. So that's what I have to say on that trend. You're muted, Jim.
That's a beautiful picture of your mom and daughter.
I love it. It's our special garden. We love that garden. Thank you. Okay, so the next trend is portable plants, gardening while renting. And I just took this photo recently. I was in Maine, and I just loved how they had turned that kind of a parking lot driveway strip to the side of the house, transformed it into a garden with containers. And it's beautiful. And I took this photo also, and this is a storefront, and this in Maine, and they have to put these containers in every night. But look how beautiful just some evergreen shrubs and containers are. And when you're renting, you don't have to put them in every night. But it kind of hits home the fact that you can create some amazing container gardens, and they don't have to all be really high maintenance. They can be just some beautiful, colorful shrubs. But containers are just what you naturally think of when renting. It's like, oh gosh, that's all I can do is plant containers, but that's not all you can do. This is a photo of my friend Baylor Chapman. This is her place in San Francisco, and she is incredible. And she's written a couple of books about houseplants. And Baylor Chapman repurposed these shutters, painted them, and then planted them with succulents by creating these little soil pockets on the back, which is a perfect thing to do for succulents. So you can get really creative with what you do in your space that's not permanently planted in the ground. These have been around for a long time. They used to be called woolly pockets, and now they're called Wally Grow. And there's a link in the list there. And I have been sent several of these to trial, and these are great. You can fit 2 1-gallon plants in one of these. You can hang them on a fence, and then you can take them down if you need to. I've planted edible gardens in these by putting 3 in a row. They're wonderful. I love this photo here because you may not have any room at all in which to garden, but if you have stairs, they've attached these woolly pockets to the stairs, and they have these herbs right there. So that's a creative way to garden while renting. This was a really young gardener in her 20s, and they had no soil at all. It was just this paved over little section in San Francisco, but she took advantage of the fence. And her goal was to repurpose everything she could find, including, you can see these file cabinet drawers there, and attach it to the fence. And that was her garden, was on the fence. And it actually brought the neighbors together in that apartment unit because they wanted to know what the heck was going on in their shared space. And they got to know each other, and they had a little hibachi grill. And so they would fire up the grill sometimes and have a little barbecue. And so she got to know her neighbors because of this garden. It's a great story. I loved meeting her. And then this was a photo of the New York fire escape. And this gardener created a beautiful garden on the fire escape. Now, and I'm not totally sure it's legal to create such a thing, but you want to make sure you can still escape. But she's got a really beautiful garden there, and I love the little bird feeder that she has strung up as well. So there's lots of options out there for renters. You can still create some, even if it's just houseplants and you have nothing outside. There's so much you can do with gardening.
Rebecca, Dan Bernarczyk shared one of the favorite things that I'd heard about containers, and this could be for renting or owning. But
Yeah.
what a way to have it where you can totally control the environment for the plant.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Rarely do you have total control in the garden, right?
Yeah. You soil, water, you can even move its location.
Yeah. Yeah. Very, very true. Um, and then the final trend is continuing from last year, and it's just getting more and more, growing your garden knowledge with all sorts of gardening educational opportunities. And there's still so many online. There's a million gardening master classes, they all look wonderful that you can take online. But now what is exciting is that we're kind of getting back to, slowly getting back to in-person um, opportunities, which is what we embraced this year, Jim, and was wonderful, with the Freeland and Sabrina's garden in Napa. And we had our first one this past November, and it surpassed all of our expectations. I think I can safely say it was unbelievable, not just to be in person, but to learn in the garden from two designers, Freeland and Sabrina, and then everybody else. We learned, all of us, so much walking through the garden, smelling things that you can't get online. And for me, what I'll never forget is the Katsura tree that had just a few leaves left on it, and it perfumed the entire garden with the scent of like butterscotch and vanilla. I never knew they smelled like that. And they do that right before they drop. It was just magical. And somebody in the group was so inspired, they started drawing out their problem area in their own garden. And it was like it clicked for them, and they knew exactly what they were going to do when they got home. And so that's what we're offering, and I'm so happy that even though the April class is sold out, um, we've opened a new session in June, and we have 10 spots left in May. Um,
You
Jim,
know, Rebecca, what I really loved about it, and you were an amazing host,
thanks.
and Braylon, Sabrina, they're like no others,
Right.
including their garden. But we had a goal of the garden education, of course, but also the kumbaya, I
Yeah.
call it, where
Yeah.
everybody was like they didn't want to go, and how can we come back the next day? So I really enjoyed that part of it, the connection, and that was a goal, and that
Right.
happened.
Well, that sort of ties into some of what we've been talking about, like the nostalgia aspect and the like the healing properties of gardens, because as we were so surprised, there was a few people who have recently suffered a loss in their family, and health issues, serious health issues, and they didn't want to go because they didn't feel it was the right time. And then something in them said, I have to go. And they were so glad they went, because gardening is so healing, as we all know. So yeah, it's pretty amazing. It was a
Yep,
pretty amazing.
that was a lot of fun, and we'll have a link to the in-person class in the show
Yeah.
notes also.
Yes.
So Rebecca and I got to do that together. Denise is coming to the April class, which will be amazing, Denise. Um,
I'm looking
so
forward to
we're
it.
excited. We're probably going to have these classes 6 or 8 times per year, not a lot. At the times when the garden's gorgeous and there most of the training happens out in the garden, which is fun.
Yes, definitely. Um, so that's it for me.
Yep.
Do we have
If
any?
you, if to the audience, if you would put in the comments what you liked about this and how Rebecca and Denise did, that'd be wonderful. And also areas to improve. We're trying to make these programs better. But, you know, I really wanted to thank everyone. This only went out as an invite to people that have been webinar attendees and as a thank you for your patronage. And uh, it's great. We have a lot of people that have been here. This is starting the 5th year attending the webinars, and they keep coming back. And so thank you for that. And this is for all of you for that. And Denise, what can I say? You're amazing. And you've been here since day one and also editing our articles on garden design and stuff. So I'm so appreciative of that. And then Denise
My
uh,
pleasure.
introduced me to Rebecca. So, wow. Now you're co-host, Rebecca, and we have these classes with Friedel and Sabrina. So I guess who knows what twists and turns life
Right.
has. But this, I think, really brought the trends alive. And a shout out, if you would, in the notes. Rebecca really put it out for the research to take even the trends even farther. And I know trends are a lot of times poo-pooed. I do that myself. It's not like the only thing going on. There's many different trends, but it's a starting point, and to take it or leave it on a trend. And what's really huge is, as it proves today, is, and Denise, you made another great point. Gardening is so local. It's like leave the leaves could be great, but if you're in a really fire-prone area at the wrong time, not great. Everybody has different situations, so get to know that local garden center. Uh,
Yeah.
Rebecca, what else?
What else? Thanks everybody so much. This has been such a great year with the webinars, and it's been so fun to do this and to elaborate on these trends. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and both you, Jim and Denise, this is fantastic, and I love all the input um, that the attendees have. It's really great, and I can't wait to read all the notes that you
There were
questions and comments.
so many ideas shared on people's private gardens and or personal
Yeah,
spaces that
yeah,
we're going to put all those in the notes
yeah.
uh,
That's great.
so people can see what others are doing. And thanks to everyone. There's, I think, 700 or 800 comments here. So
Wow.
we'll be working overtime organizing all this. Uh,
Fantastic.
it's really nice. And Rebecca, again, thank you for making these garden trends come alive. And Denise, thanks as always. And to the audience, thanks for being involved with us. And everyone have a wonderful holiday, Christmas, and we'll see you all next year. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Rebecca. Great presentation.
Oh, thank you, Denise. Bye.
Bye.
I'm leaving this open a touch for people are still commenting.
Mm.
So
Oh, great.
Amazing number of comments today. Wow.
Are you sure we're not being recorded?
we are,
Oh,
so that
okay.
everyone can hear.
I was
Don't
gonna
say
say,
anything
I
about
was
me.
gonna say, I think I see the green light, Jim.
It's going. Todd
Oh,
Nicholson enjoyed the presentation, and he's going to be coming to our April event.
oh,
So
yeah,
we're looking
wonderful.
forward to seeing you, Todd. You're going to love it.
I can't wait to read everybody's comments. This is fantastic. Just so fantastic. We all do. We learned something all the time. And that's another thing we kept talking about. Remember, Jim, is like, you never know. Every single time, every conversation I think I've had with any gardener, I've come away learning something. Um, and so that's why I love all these comments.
Yeah, and
I
all
do
these
too.
garden tours, you meet all these nice
Oh,
people. It's
oh
just a
yeah.
wonderful thing.
God,
Just
yeah, it's
great.
great.
What
It's
I
great.
really noticed, it's the same with the webinars, Rebecca, is that the event in Napa is all of a sudden we're learning from attendees like the
Right,
arborist,
right, right.
Denise that was there, and Megan sharing tips like, oh wow, it goes both ways. And gardeners are sharers.
I see Susan Morse left a comment. Hi, Susan. She she called me her bosom buddy. Um, for breast cancer survivors, and she had lunch with Deborah Lee Baldwin yesterday. Yeah, Deborah has a lot of information on the Firewise landscaping, so I really, really recommend checking her out. This is so great. Gosh, everybody's comments. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful.
Denise, anything else?
I when doing a little bit of background research, I want to make a plug for the Berkeley Urban Bee Lab. Do you know that, Rebecca?
I don't.
It's a
No.
great website done by UC Berkeley, and they've done all this research on native bees and what they prefer
Oh,
plant-wise. And
nice.
I should have mentioned also leaving some bare soil
Yes,
for
you're
bees
right.
to
Oh, yeah,
excavate
I should
in.
have mentioned that too.
But
You're
Urban
right.
Bee Lab is a great website too.
And Denise, see, we're gonna have to add these in the notes, Jim, because that
Yes.
was really the bare soil is a really
Yeah.
good one. And Denise, didn't you mention that there was a nativar that actually is performing better than the straight species because of our hotter, the
Yeah, there's
manzanita, right?
when I've done landscape design, what a lot of people ask for is, they want huge, large scale ground covers. And so there's Arctocephalus uva ursi, point rays and emerald carpet, which are
Right,
ubiquitous.
right,
But,
right.
and this is actually a different species, but there's one called Carmel Sour that it's a little bit more upright. I think personally more beautiful leaves and a prettier habit. Very similar. And it's a much better plant for where we are now.
And so it's surviving the hotter temperatures better, is that what you're
Mhm,
saying, than the straight
mhm,
species? Yeah, that's incredible.
yeah.
Dana found the bee website, helpabee.org.
Oh, okay.
So we will add that to the show notes.
Great,
Okay, great.
nice.
So there's still a lot of people online, so I get nobody's leaving. I'm gonna go get a cocktail and come right back. But to the audience that's here still do you have any questions? And we'll just banter about for a bit. You weren't doing anything, were you, Rebecca or Denise?
Just having fun.
That's it.
Oh yeah, Mary Lou. Her greatest challenge is the rabbits munching the plants.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, you know what I always tell my clients, and it's the truth. In my experience, is deer, people think deer are the big nightmare, which they are, but I have better luck planting deer-resistant plants than rabbits. For me, rabbits are just a nightmare. It's really hard
Really?
to find rabbit-resistant plants, but it looks like Mary Lou Rush has started changing plants to Amsonia, salvias, verbascums, and penstemons. So, yeah, rabbit-resistant plants. I'm all ears if you all have some, because they're little
All ears.
buggers. And yeah, no pun intended. And you know what else? Shoot, I should have asked everybody. Does anybody have a cure for grasshoppers? Not the huge ones, the small ones, which have invaded our garden up at Lake Tahoe, Zone 6, and wiping everything out. We
Wow.
get dozens, and I look online, nothing,
Mm.
nothing. So grasshoppers, I pray they don't come down into our gardens down here.
Do you have
Jim's
rabbits in Lake Tahoe or
for the
Sacramento?
first time,
Wow.
climate change. Now they're coming down. Yeah, in Lake
Mm.
Tahoe. Never seen them in 50 years.
Yeah, Anne, I see your question on the upcoming speakers for the 2025.
Yeah.
Put in the comment there who you want to see, and we'll see what we can do.
Yeah.
We're going to start making our schedule on that shortly.
Somebody here, Rebecca is her name, more info on the Four Season salvias. So it's on my website, which is harmonyinthegarden.com, and I have a blog. And so in the search bar, if you type in salvias, it will pop up. But a great resource, gosh, the best website I've ever seen is Salvias by the Sea. And they're no longer a retail location. He's retired, but he put together such a fantastic website. And you can sort it by season and by zone and by color, like an amazing website. So Salvia, no, it's called Flowers by the Sea, right, Denise?
I'm
Yeah.
Flowersbythesea.com.
sure Dana's in there looking it up right now, and we'll
Yeah,
share
gosh,
that in the
it's so
notes.
good.
Yeah.
It's great with salvias. Um,
Lots of good info.
yeah, I've
Marion
caught.
notes birds are the best for grasshoppers. Cheers to more birds.
I know, and we have tons of birds, and I bring them in like crazy as best as I can. And I have never seen one eating the grasshoppers. So I think maybe the ones Lake Tahoe tastes terrible. So I've never seen a bird going after them. You'd think they would.
Yeah.
Claudia says, I've caught rabbits eating ferns. Yeah, they're pretty bad, aren't they? They're horrible. Catch the grasshoppers and go fishing. That's a really good point. I used to do that when I was a little girl for my dad. My new problem is voles. We have those at Lake Tahoe too, and they're a nightmare. They're probably right up there with rabbits, and just as cute as rabbits. They're really cute.
They are cute.
I know.
Yeah.
But boy, they're bad. Um, yeah. I'm not going to the Northwest Garden Show this year, somebody had asked. I used to go all the time, and I haven't for the past couple years. I miss it. Maybe I'll need to. That's a good reminder. That's a great garden show.
Maybe at some time we should take the show on the road and do something tied into some of these shows.
I think we should. I think we should go to the Northwest show. I love that show.
It's a good one. It's a really good one.
That's a bunch of gardeners up there at that show.
Yeah.
Those are my people.
So true. Seattle and Portland, boy.
Yeah,
great
they're
garden
fantastic.
cities.
They're fantastic.
I wanna throw something random out there that I think people really love. If you have Spotify, go listen to Pink Martini. It's phenomenal music. My wife and I are going to Santa Barbara to see a concert a little later this month. We're taking a flyer and going up at this busy time. And but I went to my first Garden Bloggers fling in 2013, and they had one of the songs mentioned on the CD was The Garden of Samson and Beasley, and the garden party was in their garden, and they handed out a Pink Martini CD to everybody, and it's like, does everybody out there, are you amazed sometimes as how did I get to be this age and have never heard of something? And that was the case with Pink Martini. And do you ever have that happen, Denise, where it's like, how did I get to this point and I'm just now finding out about this?
I have, but I have to say I've known about Pink Martini for quite a while, and I've
You
seen it
have?
a few times. Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh, I'm the last
played
person to
here
know.
a couple times.
See,
And the
Rebecca, I
benefits
told you,
are- yeah, they're
you need to
fantastic.
get with it.
I am the last person to know. You told me that the other day, and so I listened to them, and they're very fun. We could use some of that music, right?
Live is even better. It's
I
really
bet. I bet. That's great. We got some great speaker ideas going out here. And Jim, everybody's up for the Northwest show, so I think we need to do that. I'm getting a lot
Okay,
of.
Rebecca.
I think that's a go. I think we should do that. Pepper
Yeah.
spray.
Oh, Dana put a link to your article on salvia, so
Oh, yeah,
we'll
good.
put that in the show notes also.
Pepper spray to keep rabbits away and wild turkeys. I have wild turkeys too. Boy, they
Yeah, I have wild
mayhem
turkeys.
in the garden, aren't they? I love them, but holy cow. Do you know they kill rattlesnakes? I was reading all about them.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. One of the few things that actively hunts them down because they could kill their babies. And their legs are so tough that the rattlesnakes don't
They
penetrate.
do have very tough legs.
Yeah. Yeah. So they'll kill rattlesnakes, which I also
There's
have in my garden.
2 flocks that have joined up in our neighborhood. So now when I'm walking my dogs, they look at them and then they just go by. And the turkeys
Yeah,
come up to
right.
you like, feed
Right.
me.
Right.
They're funny creatures.
Right.
Boy, Dana in our office in the other room, she's on it. It's The Gardens of Samson and Beasley, sung by
Yeah.
Pink Martini.
Yeah, she is on
He
it.
is on it.
Marilyn suggested an amazing, wow, I'm gonna try this, some deer resistant spray, but hers smells like peppermint. And any of us who've used deer spray know it doesn't smell like peppermint. It's horrible.
It's awful.
So I'm gonna try this. This is, check that out. Nice. Yeah, Doug Tallamy would be really great. That's a great suggestion.
And that's a good website. Linda, Dana, link to his homegrown national park.
Mm-hmm. That's excellent.
That's where what they're promoting there is basically an ecological haven in every garden, or as many
Yeah.
gardens as possible across the country.
Yeah.
What a great
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah, love it.
So Debbie chimed in and said she saw Pink Martini in Buffalo, New York. Thanks for the support, Debbie. I've really got to battle Rebecca sometimes.
Yeah, let me tell you, when it comes to music, I am definitely not with it.
Yeah.
Deer
All right.
stopper smells great and works for me. Okay, I'll try that one too. Wonderful. Well, everybody's been so helpful. Love all your recommendations and ideas and comments. Thanks, everyone.
Very good. All right. I guess we'll really take off now. So everyone have a wonderful evening and a great holiday, and we'll see you next year. Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.